The small village of Lingxi sat nestled between rolling hills, far from the bright lights of China's big cities. Here, life moved at its own pace, with most families working in the local factories or tending small plots of land. It was in this humble setting that Chen Wei grew up, the youngest of 4 children in a family that valued hard work above all else. Chen's home was simple, a 2-room dwelling where the family of 6 lived, ate, and slept together. His father worked long shifts at the textile factory while his mother split her time between a small sewing job and tending to their vegetable garden. Money was always tight, but Chen's parents made sure their children never went hungry. From an early age, Chen showed a curious mind. While other children played with homemade toys in the dusty village roads, Chen would often sit quietly, watching patterns in nature. How leaves arranged themselves on branches, how water flowed around rocks in the stream, how shadows moved throughout the day. His older siblings teased him for being lost in the clouds, but Chen's parents noticed something special in their youngest child. When Chen turned 6, he began attending the village school, a worn-down building with cracked walls and windows that rattled in the wind. The school served children from several nearby villages, with 3 teachers handling all subjects for over 100 students. Resources were scarce. Students shared textbooks, and chalk was used sparingly to make it last. It was in this unlikely setting that Chen's gift for numbers first appeared. During a basic counting lesson, while other children struggled to follow along, Chen not only grasped the concepts immediately, but began to ask questions that left his teacher, Mr. Huang, stunned. "Teacher Huang," the small boy asked one day, tugging at his instructor's sleeve. "If I have 5 apples and give away 3, I have 2 left. But what if I have nothing and take away 3? Where do the apples go?" Mr. Huang had smiled at first, thinking it was a child's silly question. But looking into Chen's earnest eyes, he realized the boy was genuinely trying to understand the concept of negative numbers, something not taught until much later in the curriculum. As weeks passed, Mr. Huang noticed Chen solving problems in ways he'd never seen before. While other students followed the standard methods taught in class, Chen developed his own shortcuts and techniques. When asked to add a column of numbers, Chen didn't work from top to bottom like the others. Instead, he grouped numbers in ways that made calculations faster, looking for pairs that added up to 10 or rounding numbers to make them easier to work with. "Chen," Mr. Huang asked one afternoon after school, "how did you know to group the numbers like that? Who taught you this method?" The boy looked confused. "No one taught me. It just makes more sense this way. The numbers talk to each other, and I listen to what they say." Mr. Huang had been teaching for 23 years in this village school. He had seen bright students before, but Chen was different. The boy didn't just learn quickly. He seemed to see mathematics in a way that went beyond what was in the textbooks. As Chen progressed through school, his abilities became more pronounced. By age 10, he had worked through all the mathematics textbooks available at the village school, solving problems meant for students many years older. Mr. Huang began bringing books from his own collection, and even borrowed advanced materials from a cousin who taught at a city high school. Life outside the classroom remained challenging for Chen's family. His oldest brother had left school early to work in the same factory as their father. His 2 sisters helped their mother with sewing work, bringing in extra money for the household. Everyone expected Chen would soon follow the same path. Education was a luxury most village children couldn't afford past the basic levels. But Mr. Huang saw a different future for Chen. One evening, after helping Chen work through a particularly challenging set of geometry problems, the teacher made the long walk to the Wei family home. Chen's parents welcomed him with hot tea, curious about this unusual visit. "Your son has a gift," Mr. Huang explained, as the family sat around their small table. "In all my years of teaching, I've never seen a mind like his. He doesn't just learn mathematics, he seems to discover it on his own." Chen's father nodded politely but looked unconvinced. "We are proud of Chen, but what good are numbers to a factory worker? Books don't put food on the table." Mr. Huang leaned forward. "There is a competition, the National Mathematics Olympiad. Students from all over the country participate. The winners receive recognition, sometimes scholarships. Chen has a chance, a real chance." Chen's mother looked at her husband, hope flickering in her tired eyes. Could this be true? Could our Chen have opportunities we never had? That night, after Mr. Huang left, the family talked late into the evening. Chen's siblings argued in his favor. Perhaps one of them could finally break the cycle that had held their family for generations. His father remained doubtful, worried about raising hopes only to have them crushed. The competition costs money, he said. Travel, lodging, proper clothes. Where would we find such funds? Chen sat quietly, listening to his family debate his future. He had never been beyond the neighboring town, let alone to a big city where such competitions were held. The thought filled him with both excitement and terror. The next day at school, Mr. Huang called Chen to stay after class. From his worn leather bag, the teacher pulled out a stack of papers, past examinations from the Mathematics Olympiad. "Try these," he said simply. "Let's see where you stand." Chen took the papers home and worked on them every evening after chores, using the dim light of their single lamp. The problems were unlike anything he had seen before. Some took him hours to solve, requiring him to think in ways he hadn't previously imagined. Yet each solved problem brought a rush of joy that made the struggle worthwhile. 2 weeks later, Chen returned the completed papers to Mr. Huang. The teacher spent that evening checking Chen's work, his excitement growing with each page. Not only had Chen solved most of the problems correctly, but some of his approaches were elegantly simple, different from the standard methods. The next morning, Mr. Huang arrived at school early and requested a meeting with the principal, Mrs. Lin. The school had never sent a student to the National Mathematics Olympiad before. Such competitions were typically dominated by students from prestigious schools in Beijing, Shanghai, and other major cities, children who had specialized training and resources beyond anything available in their small village. "It's setting the boy up for humiliation," Mrs. Lin argued. "Even if we found the money to send him, he would be competing against students who have been groomed for these contests since kindergarten." Mr. Huang pushed the stack of solved problems across the desk. "Just look at his work first." Mrs. Lin sighed and began reviewing the papers. Her expression changed gradually from skepticism to surprise and finally to something approaching wonder. After the last page, she looked up at Mr. Huang. "He solved the Liu theorem problem? Even I couldn't do that one when I was studying mathematics at university." Mr. Huang nodded. "And look at his solution. He didn't use the standard approach. He found his own way." For the first time, Mrs. Lin seemed to consider the possibility. "The registration deadline is next week. Even if we approve this, where would the money come from? The school budget has no room for such expenses." "I've been thinking about that," Mr. Huang replied. "What if we held a community fundraiser? The village has always taken pride in its children. If they knew one of their own had this opportunity." That weekend, the school courtyard transformed into a bustling marketplace. Families brought homemade foods, handcrafts, and offered services like bicycle repair or haircuts. Children performed songs and simple plays, with viewers tossing coins into a collection box. Chen's family contributed his mother's famous dumplings and his father's skilled wood carvings. Word spread through neighboring villages about the math genius from Lingxi. People came out of curiosity as much as generosity. Some requested Chen solve math problems on the spot, turning it into an impromptu performance that drew cheers from the growing crowd. By Sunday evening, the community had raised enough money to cover Chen's registration fees, travel expenses, and even a new set of clothes for the competition. As Chen helped count the donations alongside Mr. Huang, the reality of what was happening finally sank in. "What if I can't solve the problems?" he whispered, suddenly afraid. "What if I let everyone down?" Mr. Huang placed a gentle hand on Chen's shoulder. "You've already made this village proud. The outcome doesn't matter as much as your courage to try." But as the competition date drew closer, Chen felt the weight of expectations growing heavier. Every day, villagers would stop him on his way to school, offering encouragement that felt more like pressure. At night, he dreamed of blank paper and problems he couldn't solve, waking up in cold sweats. Mr. Huang noticed the change in his student and adjusted their preparation sessions. Instead of focusing solely on problem solving, he began teaching Chen breathing techniques and ways to stay calm under pressure. "Mathematics isn't just about finding answers," he told Chen. "It's about thinking clearly when facing the unknown. When you enter that examination hall, remember, you belong there just as much as anyone else." As autumn leaves began to fall, The day of Chen's departure approached. The entire village gathered to see him off at the bus station. His mother packed his favorite steamed buns for the journey. His father, a man of few words, pressed something into Chen's hand, a small wooden carving of a soaring bird. "To remind you that you can fly higher than you know," he said gruffly, quickly turning away to hide the moisture in his eyes. As the bus pulled away from the village, Chen watched his family and neighbors waving until they became tiny dots in the distance. The road ahead wound through mountains and valleys, carrying him toward an uncertain future. But tucked safely in his pocket was his father's wooden bird, and in his mind were Mr. Huang's words of wisdom. Chen Wei, the quiet boy from a forgotten village, was heading to the big city to make history, though he didn't know it yet. He was simply following the path that numbers had opened before him, one problem at a time. The 5-hour bus journey from Lingxi village to Hefei city was the longest trip Chen had ever taken. As farmland gave way to suburbs and finally to towering buildings, Chen pressed his face against the window, taking in every new sight with wide-eyed wonder. The city was overwhelming, streets packed with cars and motorbikes, sidewalks crowded with people rushing in every direction, neon signs flashing advertisements for products he'd never heard of. When the bus finally stopped at the central station, Chen clutched his small bag tightly and stepped into the chaos. Mr. Huang had written detailed instructions for reaching the university guest house where competitors from rural areas could stay for a small fee. Chen had memorized the directions, but standing now amid the noise and movement of the city, doubt crept in. "Are you lost, young man?" A street vendor selling steamed buns noticed Chen standing frozen on the sidewalk, map in hand. Chen nodded shyly. "I need to find Anhui University." The vendor smiled. "Ah, it's not far. Take bus number 12, get off at the 3rd stop, then walk 2 blocks east." He pointed to a bus stop across the street. "Are you visiting family there?" "No," Chen replied quietly. "I'm here for the mathematics Olympiad." The vendor's eyebrows rose. "The national competition? Good for you. Not many country boys make it that far." He wrapped a warm bun in paper and handed it to Chen. "On the house, for good luck." This small kindness gave Chen courage. He thanked the man and headed toward the bus stop, following the directions carefully. An hour later, he found himself at the university guest house, a simple building, with shared rooms where other rural students were already settling in. His roommates included Li from a fishing village in Guangdong province and Tao from a mountain town in Sichuan. They were both older than Chen by 2 years and had competed in regional competitions before. When Chen mentioned this was his first time in any mathematics competition, they exchanged glances. "The problems are nothing like school exams," Tao warned. "Last year I could only solve 2 out of 7 questions." Li nodded in agreement. "The city school kids have special training programs and private tutors. Some study competition math for years." Chen unpacked his few belongings, carefully placing his father's wooden bird carving on the small bedside table. He didn't mention that he had never even seen a real mathematics competition paper, until Mr. Huang showed him the practice tests. That evening, the 3 boys walked to the university canteen for dinner. The food was served in portions larger than Chen had ever seen at home. As they ate, other competitors filled the tables around them, many wearing jackets with the names of prestigious schools embroidered on them. Some were discussing mathematical concepts Chen had never heard of, using terms that sounded like a foreign language. "That's Zhou Kai," Li whispered, nodding toward a tall boy surrounded by admirers. "He won gold last year and got offered a scholarship to Beijing University. They say he hasn't missed a single point in any competition this year." Chen watched the confident student hold court at his table, explaining some complex theorem while others listened intently. Would he be competing against students like that? The rice in his bowl suddenly tasted bland, his appetite disappearing under a wave of anxiety. Back at the guest house, Chen tried calling home using the communal phone in the hallway. The connection was poor, his mother's voice barely audible through the static. "We're all thinking of you," she said. "Your father couldn't get time off work, but he's telling everyone at the factory about his son in the national competition." Chen didn't share his growing doubts. Instead, he assured her he was fine, the accommodations were comfortable, and he was ready for tomorrow's challenge. After hanging up, he returned to his room and took out his notebook. reviewing formulas and techniques until his eyelids grew heavy. Sleep came fitfully, broken by dreams of impossible problems and disappointed faces back home. Chen woke before dawn, his heart racing. He sat by the window, watching the city slowly come to life as the sky lightened. In the distance, university buildings rose like mountains, their unfamiliar shapes both impressive and intimidating. At breakfast, Chen could barely eat. His roommates seemed equally nervous, though they had been through this before. They walked together to the examination hall, a grand building with columns and wide steps leading to massive wooden doors. Outside, hundreds of students milled about, some reviewing notes frantically, others projecting casual confidence that seemed impossible to Chen. Parents accompanied many of the competitors, giving last-minute advice or encouragement. Chen felt a pang of loneliness, wishing Mr. Huang or his family could be here. He clutched the wooden bird in his pocket, running his fingers over its smooth wings. "Registration is this way," Li said, pointing to tables set up at the entrance. "They'll check your ID and give you your seat number." Chen joined the line, watching as officials verified each student's documents and handed out numbered badges. When his turn came, the woman at the table looked surprised as she checked his registration. "Lingxi Village School? I don't think we've had a participant from there before." She studied his face. "This is your first competition?" Chen nodded, feeling even more out of place. She smiled unexpectedly. "Well, good for you. We need more representation from rural areas." She handed him his badge, number 427. "Good luck." As Chen pinned the badge to his shirt, a commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. A group of students wearing matching blue jackets entered, surrounded by photographers. Their teacher, a stern-looking man with glasses, was giving instructions that the students followed with military precision. "Shanghai Mathematics Academy," Tao explained. "They win the team competition almost every year." One of the Shanghai students, a girl with short hair and confident posture, noticed Chen staring. Instead of ignoring him like he expected, she nodded politely in his direction. Chen quickly looked away, embarrassed to be caught watching. A bell rang, signaling that the examination hall was opening. Students began moving toward the doors, the nervous energy palpable in the air. Chen's legs felt leaden as he followed the crowd inside. The hall was enormous, larger than any room Chen had ever seen. Hundreds of individual desks were arranged in perfect rows, each with a blank exam booklet and a small card showing a competitor number. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust particles floating in the air. Chen found his assigned seat in the middle section. On his left sat a boy wearing a Beijing science school uniform, who was arranging multiple pencils in a precise line on his desk. To his right was an empty seat, its stillness somehow adding to Chen's nervousness. At the front of the hall, officials were setting up a large clock and testing the microphone. More students filed in, finding their places among the rows. Some looked confident, others as terrified as Chen felt. He noticed the girl from the Shanghai team sitting a few rows ahead, already reviewing formula notes. 5 minutes before the exam was scheduled to begin, the seat to Chen's right was finally filled. A boy in worn clothes similar to Chen's own slid into the chair, breathing heavily. "Almost missed it," the boy whispered with a nervous smile. "Got lost on campus. I'm Huang Wei from Yunnan Province." The familiar surname reminded Chen of his teacher. "I'm Chen Wei from Anhui Province," he replied, feeling a small connection in this sea of strangers. Their brief exchange was cut short as a stern voice came over the speakers. The head examiner, a famous mathematics professor from Tsinghua University, stood at the podium explaining the rules. The examination would last 4 hours, 7 problems of increasing difficulty, with points awarded for partial solutions. No electronic devices, no talking, no leaving the room except for emergencies. "Remember," the professor concluded, "in mathematics, the process is as important as the answer. Show your work clearly. Begin." A rustle of paper filled the hall as students turned over their exam booklets. Chen took a deep breath and opened his. The first problem was about number theory, finding patterns and sequences. He read it twice, relief washing over him as he recognized the type of problem Mr. Huang had helped him practice. Chen solved the first problem in 20 minutes, checking his work carefully before moving to the second. This one involved geometry, calculating the area of an unusual shape. Again, the approach seemed clear to him, though the calculations were tedious. By the time Chen reached the third problem, an abstract algebra question involving groups and symmetries, 2 hours had passed. Around him, some students were already looking frustrated, erasing furiously or staring hopelessly at their papers. The boy from Beijing school had moved on to the fifth problem, his pencil moving with confident precision. Chen focused on his own work, blocking out distractions. The fourth problem gave him trouble, a complex probability question unlike anything he'd seen before. After several failed approaches, he decided to skip it temporarily and move on. The fifth and sixth problems were challenging but not impossible. Chen worked methodically, drawing diagrams and testing different approaches when his initial ideas failed. He was aware of time passing, the large clock at the front of the hall showing only 45 minutes remaining. Finally, Chen reached the seventh problem, notoriously the most difficult. He read it once, then again, trying to make sense of what was being asked. It involved a unique type of mathematical sequence that seemed to follow no obvious pattern. The problem asked for a formula to predict the value at any position. Chen stared at the sample sequence provided. 1, 3, 7, 13, 21. Nothing immediately clicked. It wasn't a simple arithmetic or geometric progression. It wasn't a Fibonacci-type sequence. Chen wrote the differences between consecutive terms 2, 4, 6, 8. That was a clear arithmetic sequence, but how did it connect to the original numbers? As the final 30 minutes approached, Chen noticed increasing movement around him. Some students had given up on later problems and were reviewing earlier work. Others looked defeated, slumped in their chairs. The boy from Beijing was still writing furiously, apparently stuck on the final problem like everyone else. Chen returned to the fourth problem he had skipped, managing to find a partial solution that might earn some points. Then he came back to problem 7, that final challenge that was supposed to separate the truly exceptional from the merely excellent. 20 minutes left. Chen tried a different approach, looking for patterns in how the sequence related to square numbers, triangular numbers, any known sequence. Nothing fit perfectly, 10 minutes remaining. Around him, pencils were being put down, students accepting they had done all they could. Chen refused to give up, scribbling calculations in the margins of his paper. And then it hit him. Not a flash of insight, but a quiet realization born from his unique way of seeing numbers. The sequence was related to the sum of the first n odd numbers, but with an adjustment factor. Chen quickly tested his hypothesis, his heart racing as the pattern held for each given example. With 5 minutes to go, Chen wrote out his solution, clean, elegant, and unlike the standard approach most advanced students would take. He had no time to second-guess himself. The bell rang, pencils down, examination over. As students filed out of the hall, the atmosphere was a mix of relief, disappointment, and nervous anticipation. Results wouldn't be announced until tomorrow afternoon, leaving competitors to compare notes and worry about what they might have missed. "How did you do?" Tao asked when they reunited outside. "I think I solved 6 problems completely," Li said. The 7th was impossible. They both looked at Chen expectantly. "I think I solved most of them," he said hesitantly. "Even the last one, but I'm not sure my approach was right." Li's eyes widened. "You solved problem 7? Even Zhou Kai looked frustrated with that one." Chen shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable. "Maybe I misunderstood the question. We'll see tomorrow." That night Chen couldn't sleep. He replayed each problem in his mind, second-guessing his solutions, worrying about careless errors. What if his unusual approach to problem 7 was completely wrong? What if he had embarrassed himself and his village? He stood by the window, looking out at the campus buildings glowing under streetlights. In a few days he would return to Lingxi, either with news of success or the weight of failure. Either way, things would never be quite the same. He had seen beyond his village now, glimpsed a world of possibilities he never knew existed. The wooden bird sat on his windowsill, its carved wings seeming to quiver in the moonlight. No matter what happened tomorrow, Chen had already flown further than anyone expected. Morning came too quickly for Chen, who had finally fallen asleep just before dawn. His roommates were already up and dressed when he opened his eyes, the events of yesterday flooding back into his consciousness. Today was results day. "There's a mathematics lecture this morning while they finish grading," Tao explained, adjusting his collar in the small mirror they shared. "Most competitors attend. It looks good to the university representatives who come scouting for talent." Chen nodded sleepily and got ready. His one good shirt was wrinkled from being packed in his small bag, but he did his best to smooth it out. The wooden bird went into his pocket as always, a small piece of home to carry with him. Breakfast was a subdued affair. Students who had been vocal about their solutions yesterday now ate in silence, the reality of possible failure weighing heavily. Chen picked at his congee, unable to work up much appetite. The girl from the Shanghai team sat at a nearby table, engaged in quiet conversation with her teammates. Unlike yesterday, they looked tense rather than confident. The morning lecture was held in a smaller hall than the examination. A famous mathematician from America was visiting the university and had agreed to give a talk to the competitors. Chen found a seat near the back, slightly intimidated by the foreign professor with his booming voice and wild gray hair. The lecture was about prime numbers and their distribution, a topic Chen found fascinating despite his tiredness. The professor explained how mathematicians had been trying for centuries to find patterns in how prime numbers occurred, showing both ancient approaches and cutting-edge research. Chen found himself drawn in, momentarily forgetting his anxiety about the results. The beauty of mathematics, the professor concluded, is that sometimes the simplest questions have the most complex answers. And sometimes the most elegant solutions come from unexpected places, from people who see problems differently than those who've been trained in traditional methods. Chen wondered if the professor somehow knew about his unconventional approach to problem 7. More likely it was just a coincidence, but the words gave him a small boost of confidence. After the lecture, competitors gathered in the university courtyard, checking the time frequently. Results would be posted at precisely 2 o'clock outside the main examination hall. Some students reviewed their solutions one last time, trying to calculate their potential scores. Others distracted themselves with games or conversations about anything except mathematics. Chen found a quiet spot under a tree and called home from his cell phone. His mother answered on the first ring as if she'd been sitting by the phone waiting. "How did it go?" she asked immediately. "Are you eating enough? Did you sleep well?" Chen couldn't help smiling at the familiar rush of questions. "The exam was hard but fair. We find out results in an hour." He paused. "How's Dad? Is he still working double shifts?" There was a brief hesitation that made Chen's heart sink. "Your father is fine," his mother said in a tone that suggested the opposite. "He's been pushing himself a bit too hard, that's all. Nothing for you to worry about." Chen knew there was more to the story, but he also knew his mother wouldn't burden him with family troubles while he was away. He promised to call again after the results were announced and hung up with a growing sense of unease. His father was not a young man anymore, and factory work was physically demanding. If something was wrong, 10 minutes until they post results, announced a voice breaking into Chen's thoughts. Students began moving toward the examination hall, a nervous energy propelling them forward like a single organism. The crowd grew denser as more competitors arrived, jostling for positions near the announcement board. Officials were already behind the glass doors preparing to post the lists. Chen found himself pushed toward the back, his smaller stature a disadvantage in the crowd. At precisely 2 o'clock, the doors opened. 2 university staff members emerged carrying large printed sheets, which they began pinning to bulletin boards set up outside. The crowd surged forward, then separated into smaller groups as multiple lists were posted, different categories for different age groups. Chen couldn't see anything through the wall of bodies in front of him. He stood on tiptoes trying to catch a glimpse of the lists being posted. Nearby, a girl burst into tears, whether from joy or disappointment he couldn't tell. Gradually, students began peeling away from the boards. Some walked off alone, heads down. Others were surrounded by friends offering congratulations. Chen still couldn't get close enough to see his own results. "Excuse me," said a voice at his elbow. It was the girl from the Shanghai team. "You're Chen Wei from Lingxi, right?" "Number 427? Chen nodded, surprised she knew his name. "You might want to see this." She pointed to a separate board that had been set up to the side, where fewer students were gathered. "That's the special recognition list." Confused, Chen made his way to the smaller board. Unlike the main results, which showed hundreds of names with scores beside them, this list had only 10 names. At the top was printed "Perfect Score Recipients, Gold Medal Category." Chen scanned the list, recognizing Zhou Kai's name near the top, and then third from the bottom, his own name. Chen Wei, Lingzi Village School. He blinked, certain he was misreading. Perfect score? That wasn't possible. He must have made mistakes. The unconventional solution to problem 7 couldn't possibly be correct. Congratulations, said the Shanghai girl, who had followed him. I'm Lu Min. I got 9 wrong on problem 7 like most people. Whatever approach you used, it worked. Chen was still staring at his name on the list. There must be a mistake. Lu Min shook her head. No mistake. The examiners were talking about your solution to 7 this morning. Apparently it was something they hadn't seen before. Professor Zhang wants to meet with you. As if summoned by his name, an older man in a tweed jacket approached them. Chen recognized him as one of the head examiners from yesterday. Chen Wei, I'm Professor Zhang from the National Mathematics Committee. He extended his hand, which Chen shook automatically, still dazed.
Your work yesterday was quite remarkable.
Would you mind speaking with me and some colleagues? Chen nodded mutely and followed the professor away from the crowd. They entered a small conference room where 3 other adults were seated around a table. One was the American professor from the morning lecture, now looking at Chen with intense curiosity. In the center of the table lay Chen's examination booklet, open to the final problem. Chen recognized his own handwriting, the solution he'd scribbled in those last desperate minutes. Please sit down, Professor Zhang said, indicating an empty chair. We'd like to discuss your approach to problem 7. Chen sat, feeling like he was in some surreal dream. One of the other examiners, a younger woman with sharp eyes, spoke first. The 7th problem was designed to be nearly impossible to solve completely in the given time. We expected partial solutions at best. She tapped Chen's exam booklet. Yet you not only solved it, but you did so using an approach none of us had considered. It's a variation on Srinivasan's method, said the American professor, but simplified and more elegant. Where did you learn this? Chen swallowed hard. I didn't learn it anywhere, sir. I just saw it. The examiners exchanged glances. Professor Zhang leaned forward. You developed this approach on your own, without prior knowledge of Srinivasan's work? Chen nodded. I've never heard of Srinivasan. We don't have many advanced books in my school. A silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. Chen had independently discovered a mathematical approach that paralleled the work of a recognized mathematician, and had improved upon it. Tell us about your background, the American professor said. Your training. Chen described his small village school, Mr. Huang's mentorship, the borrowed textbooks, and late nights solving problems by lamplight. As he spoke, he became aware of how extraordinary his journey must sound to these university professors. And this was your first competition? Asked the woman examiner, disbelief evident in her voice. Yes, Chen replied. My teacher thought I should try. Professor Zhang cleared his throat. Chen, your perfect score already qualifies you for the gold medal. But we believe your solution to problem 7 deserves special recognition. With your permission, we'd like to submit it to the International Mathematics Journal for publication. Chen stared at him, unable to comprehend what was being suggested. Publication? But I'm just a student. A student who may have developed a new approach to a class of mathematical problems, the American professor said. Age is irrelevant in mathematics. Innovation is what matters. The meeting continued for another hour, with the examiners asking detailed questions about Chen's thought process and how he had arrived at his solution. Chen did his best to explain, sometimes drawing diagrams or writing equations to illustrate his thinking. When they finally finished, Professor Zhang walked Chen back to the courtyard where other students were still milling about. News of the rural genius had already begun to spread. People pointed and whispered as Chen passed. The award ceremony is tomorrow morning, Professor Zhang said. But I wanted to give you this now. He handed Chen an envelope with the university's seal. It's an invitation to attend our summer mathematics program, with a full scholarship. You have exceptional talent, Chen Wei. It should be nurtured. Chen took the envelope with shaking hands. Thank you, sir, but I need to discuss this with my family first. The professor nodded understandingly. Of course. But remember, opportunities like this are rare. Don't let circumstances hold you back from your potential. As Professor Zhang walked away, Chen was surrounded by curious competitors wanting to hear about his meeting with the examiners. Even Zhou Kai, the previous year's champion, came to offer congratulations. I looked at your solution after they posted the scores, Joe said. It's brilliant. Different from how they taught us to approach such problems. Chen thanked him awkwardly, unused to such attention. He spotted his roommates on the edge of the crowd and excused himself to join them. Gold medal with a perfect score, Teo exclaimed, clapping Chen on the back. You're famous now. Wait until your village hears about this. They're publishing his solution in a journal, Lee added, having overheard snippets of conversation. No one from my province has ever had their work published. The reality of what was happening finally began to sink in. Chen had not only succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, he had potentially changed the course of his life. The invitation to the summer program could lead to university scholarships, opportunities his family had never imagined possible. His first instinct was to call home with the news, but he hesitated. His mother's evasiveness about his father's condition nagged at him. Before celebrating, he needed to know the full situation at home. Chen found a quiet corner of the courtyard and made the call. This time his sister answered, "Chen, we were just talking about you. Have the results been announced?" "Yes," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I did well. But first, tell me about Dad. What's really going on?" His sister's pause told him everything. "He collapsed at work 3 days ago. The doctor says it's exhaustion and his heart isn't good. He's home now resting, but he can't work for at least a month." She sighed. "We didn't want to worry you before your competition." Chen's moment of triumph suddenly felt hollow. While he had been solving abstract problems in an air-conditioned hall, his father had been pushing his aging body to the breaking point in a hot factory. "I'm coming home tomorrow," Chen said firmly. "I'll take the evening train after the award ceremony." "But Chen, if you did well, shouldn't you stay for any opportunities that might come up?" "Mom and Dad would want that." Chen looked at the scholarship envelope in his hand. "There are opportunities, but I need to discuss them with everyone in person. Family comes first." After ending the call, Chen sat alone, wrestling with conflicting emotions. The gold medal, the publication, the scholarship offer, all represented futures he had never dared to imagine. But his father's health, his family's financial situation, these were immediate realities that couldn't be ignored. The wooden bird in his pocket seemed heavier somehow. His father had carved it as a symbol of flight, of rising beyond circumstances. But what good was flying if you abandoned those who had given you wings? As afternoon faded into evening, Chen made his decision. He would accept the gold medal and the honor of publication. But the summer program would have to wait. His family needed him now, needed the extra hands for work, needed the prize money that came with the gold medal for medical expenses. Professor Zhang might not understand his choice to return to Lingxi instead of immediately pursuing academic opportunities. The American professor might see it as talent wasted, but Chen knew mathematics would still be there in a few months after his father recovered. Numbers had patience. They had waited thousands of years for people to discover their secrets. They could wait a little longer for Chen Wei. That night, as Chen packed his few belongings for the journey home, he placed his father's wooden bird carefully on top. Tomorrow he would stand on a stage and receive recognition for seeing patterns that others had missed. But the most important pattern was the one his parents had shown him all his life, that love meant sacrifice, and true achievement was measured not just in personal success but in how you lifted others, along with you, the boy who had walked into the examination hall as a nervous village student would walk out as a gold medalist, who had made mathematical history. But more importantly, he would walk home as a son who understood that the most complex equation of all was balancing dreams with responsibilities. The awards ceremony was held in the university's grand hall, a space Chen had only glimpsed from outside. Polished wooden floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers, and portraits of distinguished academics lined the walls. Competitors and their families filled the rows of seats, their excited chatter creating a constant hum throughout the room. Chen sat in the front row alongside the other special recognition recipients. His simple clothes stood out among the pressed uniforms and formal attire of the other medalists. The Shanghai team sat together in matching blazers, looking like they belonged in this prestigious environment. Liu Min caught his eye and gave a small, encouraging nod. Chen had called home again that morning, speaking briefly with his father, who sounded tired but proud. "Whatever happens next is your choice, son," his father had said. "You've already brought honor to our family name." Those words echoed in Chen's mind as the ceremony began. University officials gave speeches about the importance of mathematical education and the bright futures awaiting the talented young people in the room. The provincial education director spoke at length about China's growing prominence in international mathematics competitions. Finally, the awards presentation began. Bronze medals came first, dozens of students filing across the stage to receive their recognition. Then silver medals, a smaller but still substantial group. When gold medals were announced, only 15 students rose from their seats. Chen followed the others, his heart pounding as he climbed the steps to the stage. Professor Zhang personally handed him his medal, a heavy disc hanging from a red ribbon. "Congratulations, Chen Wei," he said warmly. "Remember what we discussed?" Chen nodded, clutching the medal tightly. The audience applauded politely as he and the other gold medalists stood in a line across the stage. Cameras flashed, recording the moment for school newsletters and local papers. Then came the special announcements. Zhou Qi was recognized for winning gold 2 years in a row. A team from Beijing was honored for having the highest average score. And then Professor Zhang stepped forward again, gesturing for Chen to join him at the podium. "This year we witnessed something truly extraordinary," the professor began. "A student from a rural village school competing for the first time not only achieved a perfect score, but provided a solution to our most challenging problem that has excited the entire examining committee." A murmur ran through the audience. Chen felt hundreds of eyes fixed on him, evaluating, wondering. Chen Wei's approach to Problem 7 represents a significant contribution to mathematical thinking. The National Committee has unanimously decided to submit his work for publication in the International Journal of Mathematics, an honor typically reserved for university researchers and professors. The applause was different this time. Surprised, impressed, curious. Professor Zhang continued, explaining in simplified terms how Chen's solution differed from conventional approaches and why it mattered. Most of the audience likely didn't follow the technical details, but they understood the significance of a high school student's work being worthy of international publication. When Professor Zhang finished, he handed Chen a certificate officially recognizing his achievement. "Would you like to say a few words?" he asked quietly. Chen hadn't prepared a speech. Public speaking had never been part of his mathematics training. But he stepped forward to the microphone, looking out at the sea of expectant faces. "Thank you for this honor," he began, his voice barely audible at first. He took a deep breath and continued more strongly. "In my village, we have a saying. Even the tallest tree begins as a small seed that someone bothered to water." He glanced at Professor Zhang, then back to the audience. "I stand here today because my teacher, Mr. Huang, saw something in me worth nurturing. Because my parents worked extra hours to keep me in school. Because my community believed in me enough to send me here." Chen held up his medal. "This isn't just my achievement. It belongs to everyone who watered the seed." He bowed slightly. "Thank you." As Chen returned to his seat, the audience's applause felt warmer, more personal. He noticed a few people wiping their eyes, touched by his simple gratitude. After the ceremony, a small crowd gathered around Chen. Local reporters wanted statements about his rags to riches story. University representatives handed him brochures for their schools. Even parents of other competitors came to congratulate him and ask about his study methods. Through it all, Chen remained quiet and humble, answering questions politely but avoiding anything that felt like bragging. When asked about his future plans, he simply said he needed to discuss options with his family, not mentioning his decision to return home immediately. As the crowd dispersed, Professor Zhang approached with a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit. "Chen, I'd like you to meet Mr. Wang from the National Science Foundation. He's very interested in your development." Mr. Wang shook Chen's hand firmly. "Remarkable achievement, young man. Professor Zhang tells me you've been offered a place in the summer program here." "Yes, sir," Chen replied. "I'm very grateful for the opportunity. The foundation might be interested in expanding that support," Mr. Wang continued. "With the right guidance, talent like yours could represent China in the International Mathematical Olympiad next year." Chen felt a flutter of excitement at the thought. The IMO was the World Championship of Mathematics competitions. Bringing together the best young minds globally, to represent his country on such a stage would be an unimaginable honor. "That's very generous," Chen said carefully, "but I need to return home tonight." My father is unwell and my family needs me for now. Mr. Wang's expression shifted slightly. I see. Family obligations are important, of course, but opportunities like this don't come often, especially for students from rural backgrounds. The pause before rural spoke volumes. Chen understood the unspoken message. His background made this chance even more precious, more fragile. Turning it down even temporarily might mean losing it forever. Perhaps we could arrange something, Professor Zhang suggested, seeing Chen's dilemma. The summer program doesn't begin for 2 months. Chen could return home now and join us later if his family situation permits. Mr. Wang considered this compromise. That might be acceptable. The foundation could even provide a stipend for the family, considering the circumstances. Chen blinked in surprise. A stipend? You mean financial support? We invest in exceptional talent, Mr. Wang explained. If family finances are preventing your participation, we can address that obstacle. The possibility shifted everything in Chen's mind. A stipend could pay for his father's medicine, maybe even hire temporary help at home while he attended the summer program. It wasn't abandonment if he was actually supporting his family by being away. I would need to discuss this with my parents, Chen said, but if such an arrangement were possible, it might work for everyone. They exchanged contact information, with Professor Zhang promising to facilitate the discussions. As they parted ways, the professor squeezed Chen's shoulder. You've earned this, Chen. Don't let anything hold you back, not even your own sense of duty. By mid-afternoon, Chen had packed his belongings and said goodbye to his roommates. The gold medal was wrapped carefully in a soft cloth, tucked safely in his bag alongside the publication certificate and scholarship offers. As he waited at the bus station for his ride home, Liu Min from the Shanghai team appeared unexpectedly. I heard you're leaving already, she said, sitting beside him on the bench. Most medalists stay for the reception dinner tonight. Chen nodded. Family reasons. I need to get home. Liu Min seemed to understand without further explanation. We'll see each other again at the summer program, I expect. Or the IMO selections. Perhaps, Chen said, not wanting to discuss his complicated situation. Liu Min pulled something from her bag, a book titled Advanced Problem Solving in Mathematics. My team has an extra copy. I thought you might like it, especially if resources are limited at your school. Chen accepted the gift gratefully. Thank you. This is very kind. It's not kindness, it's self-interest, she replied with a small smile. If we end up on the national team together, I want you at your best. You're good competition, Chen Wei. The compliment from such an accomplished student meant almost as much as the medal. They exchanged phone numbers before Liu Min left to rejoin her team. For the first time, Chen felt like he might actually belong in this world of high-level mathematics, not as an oddity or a feel-good story, but as a genuine peer. The bus ride home felt different from the journey out. Chen was no longer a nervous village boy venturing into the unknown. He was a gold medalist, a published mathematician, a student with prospects beyond anything his family had imagined. Yet his mind kept returning to his father's health, his mother's worry, the reality of life waiting in Lingxi. Night had fallen by the time the bus reached the stop nearest his village. Chen walked the final 2 kilometers along a dirt road lit only by moonlight. The familiar smells of countryside, earth, growing things, smoke from cooking fires, welcomed him home. Light still burned in his family's small house despite the late hour. As Chen approached, the door flew open. His mother stood there, alerted by the sound of his footsteps. Chen, she cried, rushing to embrace him. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow. His siblings appeared in the doorway, followed slowly by his father, moving carefully and leaning on a walking stick. Chen hugged each of them before carefully helping his father back inside. You shouldn't be up, Dad. He scolded gently. You need rest. His father waved away the concern. How could I sleep when my son is returning as a champion? Let me see this famous medal. The family gathered around the small table as Chen unwrapped the gold medal. They passed it hand to hand, marveling at its weight and shine. Chen explained the certificate, the publication honor, the scholarship offers, watching their expressions shift from pride to amazement.